If everyone could take their seats, please, that would be great.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Taking Control of Cancer. Actually, I say episode, this is actually 3 special episodes where we're going to be speaking about the strategies which we've kind of teed up in previous episodes. Workforce, AI and inequalities, big strategies that are going to shape the way that cancer care looks here in North East London. I'm Steve Bland and I'm going to be speaking to a load of different guests. We're at an event actually at Tower Hamlets Town Hall, beautiful old building. I'm talking in a slightly whispered tone because as you can probably hear in the background, we are actually hearing the detail of these big strategies as I speak. So we're going to talk about workplace first, and then we're going to talk about AI, and then we're going to talk about inequalities and what the Alliance is doing to tackle all the challenges in these different areas.
We've got a few of you here. Who's from our nursing workforce? Yeah, a few there, brilliant, thank you. What about our diagnostic workforce? Who here works in diagnostics? And our medical and clinical oncologists? Okay, well, welcome everybody. You are the reason that we have developed a workforce strategy, and we hope the aim is that it will benefit all of you here.
So the first strategy that we heard about was the workforce one. Yvonne Beadle, Workforce Programme Manager here at the North East London Cancer Alliance. We're also joined by Matt Morris. Matt, I'll just get you to explain your role.
Yep, so I'm Director of Workforce and Organisational Development for Health Dynamics, and we've been working with Yvonne and the team at NELCA on the workforce strategy.
Great. Yvonne, we've just heard your presentation. You just said your mind's gone blank, but I hope not too blank. We teased this in a previous episode, kind of what was coming up. Now we've heard all the detail, or the initial detail anyway. We said, didn't we, that it's a very fluid thing that's going to evolve. Can you just give us some of the headline things you've been working on, some of the headline parts of the strategy?
Well, I think the key thing to say, which I said in the presentation just now, is whilst we've been working on this for the last 12, 15 months, the hard work kind of kicks in now, really. And it's about everybody that's here today and all of our stakeholders and our organisations that deliver cancer care in North East London to really think about and start to plan and look at where they can improve and develop their workforce and shift their workforce over the next 5 years. And it's down to them really to make this happen now as much as it is for us. I think the key headlines, as I described there, and kind of summarised in the action plan. So the first one is around developing our pipeline of our workforce, so ensuring that we've got great people kind of trained and educated and interested in cancer to join our workforce. We need to develop programs around that. The second was around retaining and supporting our workforce, so those kind of skilled professionals that we have already working in cancer care in North East London stay in cancer care in North East London. The third was around the fourth one was around our governance, strengthening our system level governance, our workforce analytics, kind of monitoring the progress. And then the third one was around the cancer pathway and redesigning that workforce pathway. So ensuring we've got kind of skill mix, new roles, new ways of working. I think I've captured that, have I, Matt?
I think you have indeed, and I think that third one's where a lot of the intersection happens. It's a lot of where the shift in the landscape that we're seeing heavily impacts the workforce, and therefore means that a lot of the roles that we do have exist, but those roles shift and change, and that's why it's so important that support for that workforce in the way of training and development and helping them understand the landscape they're in with technology and the population change and people living with cancer a lot longer is also important to how that workforce works in the future.
Not to put the pressure on the development of this particular strategy. But we said, didn't we, in the first episode, we kind of teased this, that I feel as the husband of someone that works in the NHS, having a happy, motivated workforce is just fundamental to every part of patient care and patient experience, isn't it?
Absolutely, and both of us are kind of nodding furiously there, because I think that if you have that happy, motivated workforce, they pass that onto their patients. You get happy, motivated patients.
And
It's
that,
everything.
it directly ties to both the patient experience, but it also resolves some of the challenges that we talked about around the recruitment and retention and so on and so forth. Because if you've got that happy workforce, they're motivated to stay, to develop, to do more of what they do and do it well. If they're not motivated, then some of those challenges become more critical.
And people know as well. If you know that if there is a happy, motivated workforce, people want to come and work there.
Yeah.
So then you attract more people into your
Word
workforce
of mouth,
as well.
best form of marketing out there.
Absolutely is. You talked, Yvonne, a lot about the stakeholder engagement and how much work you've done of researching and actually understanding, not just going into it and kind of this is what we think we need to do. Just talk a little bit about how much work you've done to sort of gather the opinions of the vast numbers of stakeholders you've got in this area.
Yeah, and it has been, the last 12 months has been all about that. And there were some figures up there that they weren't scientifically drawn together. They were kind of pulled together from my diary and from Health Dynamics, really, to try and quantify a little bit how much of that went on. But we have tried to engage with every part of both the specialist cancer workforce, but also kind of our more generalist workforce that will be working with and supporting people with cancer. So, our primary care colleagues, our public health colleagues, our palliative care colleagues, etc. So it's and we've done that in lots of different ways. We've had kind of workshops, focus groups, surveys, one-to-one interviews, we've joined meetings, we've presented about the work, we've met with, like our kind of professional groups, so the AHP faculty and council, or the group of lead cancer nurses, education leads, and who have I missed out there, Matt?
Patients.
Yes, really important.
So critically, we heard from the patients too, and the important thing that you hear from the patients is, of course, they just interact with the system, and as much as possible, that continuity of care for them is one of the critical things they say really loudly, is actually they like to have not 12 different people throughout their cancer journey. They like to, and that's where some of our support staff, our CNSs and other critical people come into all of this, because they are that regular face of reassurance that those patients see, and it comes back to that happy workforce that hangs around and everything else. If you've got that workforce hanging around, actually doing the job well, develop well, and whatever else, they are giving that patient that experience, and that enables everything else to then flow neatly between all those specialists, because the specialists get very short windows with that patient to do the bit they are experts at. But the support and the nursing and workforce are so critical to providing that continuity of care and that experience to the patients who, being brutally honest, are going through some of the worst time of their lives in their view of the world. So that from a workforce point of view is a fundamental thing, is to have heard that from the patients too.
Yeah, absolutely.
You talked a little bit about benchmarking and other alliances as well. We talk a lot on this podcast about the unique challenges that you've got in North East London, but what did you pick up from looking at maybe some of the work going on in other parts of the country?
Well, there's definitely stuff that we can learn from other parts of the country. There are parts where they have higher demand burden, as I mentioned, but have a more resilient workforce. There are areas that have good development programs and retention programs in place, all of which we can learn from. And whilst their kind of particular makeup might be different to ours, there are bits of that we can beg, borrow and steal, absolutely. And the other thing I think I'd like to say about the kind of data and the analysis of the data and the benchmarking, especially, is because we can get hung up on the numbers, but it is very complex and it is very nuanced, that piece, and we shouldn't focus too much on just the numbers. I think the stakeholder engagement is actually much more important, understanding what it feels like to work in North East London and how some of those kind of pressures manifest here, and looking to address those rather than just thinking about, well, so-and-so's got so many nurses or so many doctors and we need the same amount here.
And this is where the nature of cancer care as a whole comes in, because we can talk about cancer care, but there are so many specialties, so many different cancer types and tumour sites and so on and so forth, that when you then ask that question about what can we take from elsewhere, that information is huge, because the realistic answer to that is that in some pathways, when you're looking at GI cancers, there is other parts of the country that have completely adopted technological solutions that advance things, make their workforce burden smaller and so on and so forth. Whereas in other pathways, when you then go and look at what they're doing in diagnostic standards with breast and so on and so forth in other places, all of these things change massively depending on what particular patient pathway you're looking at across cancer care, and all of that heavily impacts the workforce element. So where those underpinning technology changes have already been adopted make an impact, where you've got a shift in the skills of the workforce make an impact, and all of those things in totality are the things that help shift the overall system. But the complexity of that is something not to be underestimated.
We can hear a nice buzz in the background. Talking of stakeholder engagement, you've got them all, everybody here today, looking at 2 questions. What are the 2 questions you've asked them?
So what does this all mean for me?
Yeah.
And what's my role in delivering?
I guess that's all part of what we said about it being a fluid thing that's going to evolve.
Yeah, and having done what we've done over the past year plus of work, I mean, I walked into the room and I was walking past tables and I go, well, I recognise that face, I recognise that face. And that's the reality of this, is that, yes, we've done a whole load of work to coordinate all of this, but without some of the people in the room, some of the people that are still working hard elsewhere, and what we're going to hear from all of these people here, this wouldn't exist. The whole point of this is to take what the experts in each of their fields know about the actual context of everything, back that up with what we can objectively say from data and all the other things that we've got, and then understand the reality of what our future that we can understand looks like. And that all of that together, but without these stakeholders, we are in the nicest way blind.
So where does it go from here then? What's the next kind of formal steps? Obviously there's going to be, informal feedback maybe, but how does this evolve over the next 5 or 10 years maybe?
So the first thing, we have our work plan for the next 12 months, which, as I said in the presentation, is kind of underpinned by the strategy, and we'll address some of the areas within each of the 4 main areas that we need to tackle. But really, we need to strengthen our North East London workforce governance and our kind of analytics around our workforce. So for me, that's one of the first things we really need to do, and to have the right people in the room doing that with us, and to help us kind of track and monitor the progress that we make, but also to kind of adjust where we need to as well. As Matt said, it's kind of fluid and things may change. We've got the workforce plan that will be coming out later this year, and that may need us, whilst we've got a good idea what it's going to say, but there might be something in there that actually think, right, we need to add this into what we're doing for the next couple of years.
What does success look like in whatever time frame you're looking at measuring it?
Well, I can give that from mine as an objective, data-informed point of view, because one of the key challenges...
That's a bit easier, I guess, when you've got the data. You can
much easier, but that's the point. We don't have the data, and that's where the governance comes in and the system working comes in, because what we got in the way of data when we asked for people about their cancer care teams and their workforce and everything else was the cost centres they can attribute to cancer. Now, of course, the vast majority of people interfacing with cancer patients aren't in those cost centres, because they are the support workforce that work across many strands. They are the AHPs that sit in somewhere else, because they either do speech and language therapy, or they are a radiographer, or so on and so forth. They're not sat in cancer care per se. So a fundamental in all of that, and why this big picture matters, is that by our estimations from looking at who we actually interacted with in the reality versus what we got in the data, We reckon the data only gave us half the picture, if that,
Right.
if we're being realistic. So we were very clear about that in some of the write-ups we did. But because we have different organisations and they all manage their finances differently and they break their organisations down to different structures and so on and so forth, what we get objectively as data sets doesn't actually answer the real world question of how we're doing this. And that's where the governance, the system level working, and actually that partnership across the whole of the population is so critical to delivering all of this, because with the right people in the room, as you say, Yvonne, then those conversations can be much, much more fruitful in what actually happens to the workforce, the patient, and what ultimately is the solution for people experiencing cancer.
Those different... Yeah, go on, sorry.
No, I mean, for me, the success isn't... I mean, there is a point about kind of looking at the numbers, how many vacancies have we got, what's our turnover like, what's our patient experience. I mean, that is important, but for me, success is about this strategy not just sitting on a shelf that nobody looks at again, but actually all these people in the room engaging with it, thinking about it, looking at how they can implement change, whether that's kind of developing a training plan or developing an induction program, or looking at the, embedding the Ascend framework within their PDRs, or redesigning a whole service model and looking at a different skill mix within that service model, or even, dare I say it, having a cancer workforce plan in their organisation, which they might not have right now.
Yeah. Right, you've got a few challenges coming up. Then it's, as you said, it's only just the start, isn't it, of the journey to make sure you've got a happy, motivated workforce, which, as we said, absolutely fundamental. Thank you very much, Yvonne and Matt.
Thank you.
I'm joined by Alison Hill now. Alison, do you want to just explain your role? What's your job?
Yeah. So thanks, Steve. I'm the Director of Cancer and Palliative Care Nursing at Barts Health, which means I cover St Bartholomew's, Royal London, Newham and Whipps Cross for cancer and palliative care nursing.
So you have a huge interest in the happiness, the motivation of your workforce. What are your kind of thoughts on the strategy? And I mean, I guess first and foremost, maybe how important is it to have a strategy like this?
I think it's really important at the current time because it sort of follows on from our national cancer strategy very nicely, and it sets the scene for us for the next probably 5 to 10 years. I think we've always been aware that there are workforce issues that have been brewing for some time, which relate to, particularly for nursing, the changes in nursing education, the fact that many nurses are not caring for cancer patients during their undergraduate training means that they often come out not knowing that they would like to try cancer care as a career. On top of that, there are also things that affect all of us living and working in London, which is the cost of living and the fact that for many staff in more junior roles in nursing, living and working in London is a financial big ask.
What are some of the workforce challenges that you specifically see?
So what I see is difficulties recruiting nurses to the cancer wards, possibly because when they qualify they leave London because it's cheaper and easier for them. When we do recruit them, they don't necessarily stay very long, and some of that reflects the more mobile workforce we have in London because people can go down the road. And in some ways that's good. It's good to have a mobile workforce, but we do want to retain people for longer than 6 or 8 months in the ward areas because we've barely had a chance to train them up to look after cancer patients. In terms of our specialist workforce, because we're finding it difficult to attract people in the ward and department areas, that then filters through to the more senior roles, and it's difficult to find specialist nurses with the expertise and knowledge that they might have had 5 or 10 years ago. So that means we take more junior staff into those roles, and we have to try and train them and educate them once they're in the role, and that is in itself quite difficult, I think, to take more junior staff into specialist teams. It has an impact on the whole multi-professional team, really.
Yeah, that's a challenge, isn't it? Because I guess in a way you can mould them a little bit more. You can kind of almost build the workforce that you need, but maybe you start from a lower point.
Yeah, and also you've got to look at that individual coming into a specialist role. it's quite a big ask, and if we don't support them and develop them properly, they may give up. They may leave after a short time, and we have noticed that, and that's where some of the work we've been doing with Macmillan for the clinical development lead role, and we have one in North East London, who spends time with those newly appointed clinical nurse specialists in particular, to help support them over that first 6 to 8 months and give them a bit more intensive input that maybe we could, in the hospital.
So what did you make of the strategy then? Have you sort of been part of the process? What have you made of what you've heard in terms of the final document?
So I've been part of the process, and it has been really interesting watching it evolve. I think to a certain extent, from my perspective, there are no surprises in it, but I think it's really good that everything has been brought together in one strategy, and it's just the timing of it is really good. And I think that also it just makes us sit back and think, right, this is the prototype of where we need to be going, and where do we make a start? Because some of the things in the strategy are quite long-standing problems, and I think the most important thing for us now is to pick off some things that we can do quickly and easily to get everybody on board for the bigger pieces of work, really.
And that's the challenge too, isn't it? And now, Yvonne was just saying to us, now is, we're starting off now. Actually, this is the launch of the strategy, but it's only just the start.
It's the beginning.
And there's a lot more work to come.
Yeah.
Alison, thank you so much.
Thank you.
So I'm Charlotte Rowe. I'm the Cancer Performance Manager at Homerton Healthcare Foundation NHS Trust. And so my role was mainly about the pathway to diagnosis and treatment from the moment of referral for patients, and how do we try and get them diagnosed, treated as quickly as possible. And I manage a team, an admin team at Homerton, and I'm also part of kind of the leadership team involved in cancer pathways. And so for me, a lot of this workforce strategy is all about that beginning bit of the pathway. I think it was talked about around patients are needing to be diagnosed quickly, the health inequality side of it, how they want support, they want before the diagnosis. And a lot of the roles we're talking about here are cancer nursing roles, and a lot of those start traditionally at the point of a diagnosis. But we've got patients who, being referred, they're nervous, there's a lot of uncertainty, and there's a big part of time where they need support in a different way that we haven't traditionally had a clinical workforce that has been able to address that need, because they're so focused on the actual day-to-day of how do we get this diagnosis. So we've been trying to introduce roles that we call FDS nurse roles that are there. They support with triage of patients, but they're also supposed to be a contact point for patients who are nervous and uncertain on pathways. But it's very difficult to really make sure that these roles are fit for purpose for the people in them, that they're being able to develop skills, that there's a pathway. There needs to be a pathway for these people, these nurses, to develop into clinical nurse specialists. And I think that's going to be, should be a real area of focus here, because we've got this amazing opportunity, but how does it all fit in? And everything we were talking about just fits into, for me, it's that role.
It's such a challenge, isn't it? This, because you're part of the workforce. You also lead part of the workforce, but then there's sort of two bits, something like it. We talked with Yvonne before about the importance of having a really happy, motivated workforce. But then actually there's the right workforce too, isn't there? The right people in the right jobs, and you're doing the right things. Maybe there need to be new jobs created, and there's such a big challenge with the workforce.
And I mean, this kind of FDS role could be a really good solution to some of the CNS challenges we have around the vacancies in CNS roles, and it's that pipeline that they were talking about of how do we get people to see CNS roles as somewhere they want to be. We actually, I don't know what's the in-between, I don't know enough about nursing roles, but trying to create something like that. But I'm the manager of the admin team pretty much at Homerton that deal with cancer patients, and we are very fortunate to have a really great team that have been performing really well. But there's also a case of we have, in a good way, we don't have much turnover. But equally, that does mean we've ticked, we might have solved the retention side of it.
You did a lot right, obviously.
But I'm thinking about all the conversation about AI, automation and things like that, and we by no means want to shrink our workforce, but we need to make sure that we're agile enough to deal with the changes that are going to be coming. So for me, one of the actions leaving today is about what training needs are there in my team. If I need to stop thinking about training needs for today's role, actually, and what is the training need for tomorrow.
That's a really good point, isn't it? Because I think we talk about retention a lot as being a really good thing, but actually maybe that could lead to some complacency that you're doing everything right, and you do need to be constantly evolving and thinking about ways to develop.
Exactly. And there's also one of the problems about retention is that pipeline that we're talking about. Kind of, although it's a positive thing in many ways, you don't want the block in the pipeline so that people that are lower banded roles can't see a way to develop a place where they can be. So I think that's something we have to work on. We are trialing a new, more senior role coming up soon, which we're really hoping will try and give a bit more opportunity for people to develop. But there's a lot of challenges and the positives and negatives for all these things.
Exciting though to have a strategy and a bit of a roadmap for, I mean, Yvonne was at pains to say this isn't guidelines really. It's the start of a process, isn't it? But exciting to have a strategy and a kind of a idea of where we're going.
Definitely. I think a lot of this needs to be happening across NEL. For example, I know that we at Hamilton have a really good, I talk about the retention in the team is good. I know there are other trusts that have challenges related to it. But are we thinking together of how we can get more peer support available not for patients, but for admin staff who, and to be honest, these roles are difficult because things are happening at pace, and even though they are often quite once removed from that patient, we're still talking about patients every day. We're talking about real life stories that are happening, and people's lives are also happening behind the scenes. And I think that work-life balance, that clinical teams do tend to get quite a bit of support with what they're doing, and reflective practice, that kind of thing. Do we need to be thinking about that kind of approach for admin staff as well, to prevent burnout, to make sure that people, because we do have levels of sickness, because these are intense roles. Lots of things to think about that all come into this workforce strategy that now perhaps NELCA can be supported with across North East London.
Wonderful, thank you very much, Charlotte.
So I'm Jan Flint, I'm the Cancer Performance Director at Barts Health.
Tell me some of the challenges that you face you're part of the workforce, but you also lead the workforce, or part of the workforce at least. What are some of the challenges that you see, in this area, and what did you make of the strategy in terms of addressing some of those challenges?
So I think one of the things we've been focusing on over the last year is how we improve our operational standards and performance, and actually we've done that really successfully across Barts Health, so I think we've made really good inroads. The other thing we've been doing is working around how we make better utilisation of our staff in the right roles. So I oversee the Central Cancer Performance Improvement Team, and really thinking about how they provide the best service to support our MDTs and our patients. And I think one of the challenges is we know at the moment we're working in a really financially constrained environment. We've had challenges around being able to get posts approved in a timely way. So we've been trying to sort of reorganise our staff to focus on the things that have the biggest impact, and trying to make sure that we deprioritise those tasks that don't add value. It really needs us to work closely with our clinical teams, our nursing teams, our AHP teams to help identify that. And I think there's quite a bit more work that we've got to do in that area.
It's such a complex area, workforce, isn't it? I was talking to Charlotte a minute ago about, it isn't just about having a happy, motivated workforce. You've got to think about the right people in the right roles. Are there some new roles? Are there some roles that perhaps we don't need as the needs, technology advances or something? You have to be constantly thinking and evolving, don't you?
Yeah, I think as the digital world changes, this is a real challenge for everyone, and I think there's some vulnerability for people in the roles that they do. but I think it's how we use that workforce better. So I'm really passionate about what are the things that we need to focus on, and what are the things that don't add value across our pathways. So, we still got examples where we are printing lots of different sort of MDT lists, or duplicating processes and procedures. So it's thinking about how we enable our workforce to articulate that in a way that provides support to the MDT.
And how do you think the strategy that you've heard this morning, obviously we should say, we keep saying it's the start of a process, but how do you think the strategy will address some of those challenges?
Yeah, so I think what's good is it really resonates with a lot of the bottlenecks that we understand in some of our diagnostic elements of our pathway. So I wonder whether that's an area that we need to start with in terms of where's the areas that don't add value, where's our waste, how do I support people to connect it in that at the right place, and use my workforce to facilitate some of those processes. I think the other thing is I'm an AHP by background, so I'm kind of passionate about how we make sure we make better use of AHP roles or supporting roles. I was also on a table with someone from the Millen Centre, and again I think there's a lot that they do in supporting patients that actually are parts of the pathway that we've not quite got right. So how do we ensure that we hear their voice and use that resource to support?
What a great thing actually to be sat on a table with different people from different backgrounds and different priorities, different challenges and things.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it gives that diversity of voice. I think what would have been good is to have a patient rep on the table. So really, what is it that they need from us in a better way? And certainly, I've kind of had experience of listening to some patient complaints, which makes you realise how we don't connect things well across the organisation, so it can feel quite disparate. And again, I think it's about how we use the workforce strategy to enable us to improve that.
Yeah, that's got to be what it all comes back to, isn't it?
Yeah.
Happy, motivated workforce, people in the right jobs, doing the right things, only helps the patient experience and better outcomes follow. So, yeah, fingers crossed it's going to evolve and develop and keep patients at the heart of it, and we'll see where we are in a year or two. And thank you very much, Jan.
Brilliant, thank you.
And that, I think, concludes our workplace podcast. Really exciting, loads of great conversations, loads of great opinions. As Yvonne said right at the very start, this is just the start of the process, and it's going to evolve and it's going to develop. Loads of people's opinions are going to be part of the conversation, and loads of conversations that we're hearing today, you're still hearing them behind me in the room at Tower Hamlets Town Hall. So yeah, thank you very much for listening. Next up is going to be AI.